after the Civil War, Germans are seen as loyal to America, right? But a lot of this changes in the early 20th century during the years of World War One. After the U.S. entered the war, German Americans were under suspicion, and there was the expectation to basically publicly prove their patriotism. This kind of led to these so-called loyalty tests, and I just want to talk a little bit about them because I find them really interesting. Tell me about these loyalty tests.
Yeah, I mean, so a loyalty test, it wasn't like a written exam or anything like that. It was more so like a social expectation. After the U.S. entered the war in 1917, German Americans were viewed with suspicion. People thought that they might be secretly loyal to the Kaiser instead of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So these tests, they come in a bunch of forms, and you might be expected to buy Liberty bonds. If you didn't, people would say you were pro-German, or there would be an expectation that you would publicly denounce Germany, even if your parents were from there. You wouldn't be speaking German in public or at church. Some towns even banned it in schools.
Yeah.
And then a lot of German families, they changed their names to sound more Anglo. So like a Schmidt would turn into a Smith.
Or a Schicklgruber will turn into a Hitler. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
I'm joking.
But I mean, a lot of families also sent their kids to go fight in the war too. Because basically,
so we're totally patriotic. Look, I sent my kid to the war. Yeah. It's fucked up.
Well, basically, if you were German American, you had to overperform in your Americanness to avoid harassment.
Honestly, I'm not going to try and go down this rabbit hole here, but I feel like that kind of happens right now with certain ethnic groups, feeling like they have something to prove to the wider majority here in the United States. But I digress. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. Maybe another time. There's some really messed up things that went down, though. Like this wasn't just social pressure. It got pretty ugly, I think. For example, in Collinsville, Illinois, there's this German-American guy named Robert Prager, and he gets lynched by a mob in 1918. And his only crime was that he was a socialist. He had a German accent, and he applied to join a local miners' union. Like, that was it. That was enough. They wrapped him in an American flag and marched him through the streets, and they strangled him to death. And the killers were tried. They put him on trial, and then they were acquitted. And the jury said it was done in the name of patriotism. Let that sink in for you. They literally said, it's fine to kill this guy because it was done in the name of patriotism. Failure of the justice system, in my opinion. But, then you had all these towns that were renaming everything, right? Sauerkraut became Liberty Cabbage. Side note, do you remember during the 9/11 saga, like early time after, there was like this movement of people trying to rename French fries to freedom fries because the French weren't hard enough on the word terror. Do you remember that shit?
Yeah, I do. Freedom fries.
Freedom fries. A couple of other stupid ones. So we have sauerkraut becoming Liberty Cabbage. We have dachshunds, the dog breed, they were calling them Liberty pups, and German language newspapers were just basically shut down, or they were burned down in some cases. In Iowa, the use of like foreign languages in public, including in church and later on over the phone, were looked down upon. Like imagine not being able to pray in the language that is like your primary language, like your mother tongue. It's pretty wild, right? It's crossing into some First Amendment, violations there for sure. Schools start dropping German classes. German music was banned. Beethoven got canceled. I'm not even kidding. Like they canceled Beethoven. And then you get like groups like the American Protective League, who was a private citizens group who basically were deputized to spy on their neighbors, open up their mail and like root out like what they considered as disloyalty wherever they found it or can perceive it. It's basically a full-on cultural purge, and even the people who had been in America for generations, who had fought in the Civil War, who had been considering themselves 100% American, suddenly had to prove that they weren't like the enemy. And that's how fast the tide turns, and There used to be these German towns in America, and they were erased, gone.
Yeah, you don't really see them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I will add that also German immigration stopped to a large degree after like 1890 something,
Yeah.
because that's when Germany started like providing a lot of its social welfare programs. So
Yeah.
people were like, yeah, we're probably going to stay here. We get like a pension here and all of that. So
Mm-hmm.
the
We can still speak German here too.
yeah, so immigration largely stopped right in the late 19th century. However, I mean, there are still German-born people. I mean, we're talking about people who may have come to America when they were 6. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they're ready to fight in the war when they're 20 or 21 when the
Mm-hmm.
war starts. But yeah, just going back to that, this crazy effort to erase German culture, because this is where it really where you see the death of it.
Mm-hmm.
This country was in like a straight up state of mania. I mean, like going through people's mail. But you had these deputized people to go through people's mail and be like, "Oh, we'll see if he's writing a letter to the to Mexico or something to
Yeah, right.
instigate a fight." That's some wild stuff. And what's really wild about it is that the United States, or even Anglo-American, didn't have some ancient blood feud with Germany. Most of them thought that they were the same peoples. You know, most of the Protestant elite at this time, they considered themselves Germanic people. I mean, who was Britain invaded by? You know, who were they dominated by? The Anglo-Saxons, who were
Right.
who were a Germanic tribe, or they were Germanic peoples.
Mm-hmm.
I'm no expert on that, you know, the British invasion cycles and Middle Ages, but I mean that they saw themselves as having this shared ancestry. So it's really strange that this feud that the United States, you know, turned so harshly, because there weren't centuries of war or inherent ethnic hatred. I bet most Americans at that point of time would not even really be able to point out Germany in a map
Probably
before
not.
1914.
Yeah.
Just like how most Americans now probably can't point out Iran in a map.
Probably not.
But once the U.S. entered the war, the government and the media were able to essentially manufacture an enemy. And the Wilson administration, they create the Committee of Public Information, which was a propaganda office. If you couldn't tell by the name,
Right.
the Committee of Public Information. I mean, that's the most propaganda
Yeah.
sounding office I've ever heard of.
Yeah. Right. Let me see if I can pull up some pictures. But go ahead, keep talking.
So the propaganda they put out, I'm sure everyone has seen it. Everyone has seen the World War I propaganda from both the United States and from London. Let's actually go through some of it, because I think it'd be
funny.
interesting for people to see.
All right. Yeah. Let me bring this up here. So I think the most famous one is this one, like the King Kong looking one. It's like, destroy this mad brute, enlist in the U.S. Army, right? And it's a German monkey looking dude, for those who aren't watching this. And he's wearing a German army helmet. He's got the stupid German, mustache thing going on. He's got a big club, and on the club is the German word Kultur, which is bloodied, as is his fists. And the important part of this is he's seems to have abducted a bliss white woman, who I'm presuming is supposed to be representative of, an American, delightful woman or something like that.
Got himself a white woman.
He got himself a white one. Very interesting. Funny picture. What else do we got? Let's see. This one says, your money brings the book when we need when we want it. What is this? From the American Library Association? This one's stupid. Let's look for another one.
I have an anti-German propaganda World War One.
This one looks pretty interesting. So let's see what this is all about. All right, this is a one-pager. British Empire Union, once a German, always a German. And it's like a whole-ass comic book. It's like on this frame on the top left, is he bayoneting a baby?
He's bayoneting a baby.
Holy shit. All right, what else do they got? Okay, German's got a guy tied up on a stake here or something. He's got a stupid-looking grin on his face.
This one guy, there's a woman cowering in fear in a corner.
Yeah, he's probably
the implication is that she is
she does not consent.
She does not consent to what's going to happen next.
No.
And then you have this
what's this weird looking? Okay, so this is like supposed to be a mirror image, right? So on the left-hand side, we got this like evil German guy. I don't know what the hell this is.
A grenade
maybe. Grenade, and then a bloody knife, and it looks like he killed somebody in the background, and he's walking. And in the same pose, now he's like this nice-looking German, business guy, and he's carrying a briefcase full of samples with a sticker of Berlin on it, and I guess it's trying to evoke and say, like, these two people are the same person, And then they're like, remember, every German employed means a British worker idle. Every German article sold means a British article unsold. British Empire Union. Okay, so this is obviously British propaganda against the Germans, but
it's
still
the same thing because
same
the British propaganda was going to the United States.
Right, exactly. Here's another one for victory bonds. 4 reasons for buying victory bonds. That's pretty funny.
And then zoom in the face of the German soldier. It's like a zombified. It's like straight out of night.
Let's see. Which one? This one?
The German soldier. Like what? Oh, it's a mustache.
Let's see.
I thought it was.
I didn't know what was going on with his mouth either. Yeah, it was wild.
I thought it was like some melted. I thought his face was melting. Honestly,
just really shitty picture. That's all. What else do they got? Let's see. Here's another one. This one crazy. This one appears to be French. Where was that one?
Oh, that's a good one right there.
This one's bad. Pretty bad. I'm not gonna lie. It's
that one looks like a metal cover.
It's pretty metal. Okay, so it's like a gorilla wearing a German army hat, and his both of his arms are totally bloody, and it's clasping onto and dripping blood onto the earth, primarily dripping blood onto the European continent, and big question mark. This is in Australia, World War I poster. What else do we got here? This is a good article, historyhit.com. Good shit. What do you got? Oh yeah, this is the one I was looking for. The French one. It's just like a German army guy, but he looks like a Yeti, basically. The way that they portray the Germans in these is just like the dehumanizing, right? Like that's 100% what they're trying to do here. And honestly, what they get away with.
From my perception, I know this might sound cynical, is that we all accept that World War I was a banking war at its core.
Mm-hmm.
No one seriously disputes that massive financial interests had their hands all over it.
Yeah.
J.P. Morgan was funding the British and the French long before the U.S. ever declared war.
Right.
And American banks were deep in debt. They were deep in entente debt, and a German victory would have meant massive defaults. So from that angle, Wall Street had every reason to push the U.S. into the fight. Essentially, J.P. Morgan got on the phone with Wilson and said, "You better fucking get into this war."
Yeah.
But the thing about Wilson is that I don't know. I used to, I was a kind of a more hardcore libertarian at one time, and you're kind of taught in libertarian indoctrination that Wilson is the most evil president in U.S. history. I mean, I don't think that Wilson was a good president by any means, and I think he made a lot of bad mistakes. I don't see him the same way I used to, though. I kind of look at him as so he was a university professor. He was a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't a banker. He wasn't a general. He wasn't like some diplomat. He was an academic who spent most of his life at Princeton, who, he was absorbed in abstractions like democracy and moral progress.
Right.
He had no background in matters of war and peace. So when the war came, what I think is that he probably was told that this was going to be a short war and that it was going to be redemptive, and it was going to be a noble American mission to save civilization.
Mm-hmm.
But he was completely out of his depth.
Yeah.
He was surrounded by people who were very good at using his idealism to their own ends.
Right.
If you just like look at his administration, like Colonel Edward House, who never held office and wasn't actually a colonel, he basically functioned as Wilson's primary foreign policy liaison. He was extremely pro-British, and he likely saw the war as this kind of racial civilizational showdown between the Anglo world and the German militarism. And I wonder if a lot of elites saw World War I this way. Just based off the common sentiment, I don't think that was like a super common view around the public, but around elite circles, especially the ones who are close to the British, I think a lot of them thought that way.
Mm-hmm.
That it was kind of like a war between like the good dramatic people and the bad dramatic people, who the bad dramatic people having lost their way, and now it was up to the good dramatic people to essentially correct to correct those mistakes.
Yeah. I mean, look, I kind of hinted at this before, but unfortunately, like whenever you have kind of an ethnic group that, exists within a larger majority, that's got its own quasi or parallel society, with their own language or their own newspapers, their own schools, churches, things like that, that's always going to breed a certain amount of mistrust, I think, for the larger group. And even if that group's been loyal, to the country for generations, people start asking, who are they loyal to? Are they fully American? And, in the distinction that we're talking about right now, that dynamic was already at play with the German Americans, before the war even started. And at one point they were admired, but they were also seen as a bit separate from or apart from society. And the war just looked a little bit, it just turned a little bit of suspicion into like a whole lot of paranoia. And then, came the things like the Zimmerman telegram, which is Germany was offering Mexico like an alliance against the United States. And that changed everything, right? Because you have to remember the U.S. and Mexico had basically been at war, not long before that part, right? And the border situation was a mess, honestly, still kind of a mess right now. But when, the public hears that Germany, wants to arm Mexico and help them take back the American Southwest, suddenly this isn't just like a European conflict. This is a direct threat to American soil. Or at least that's how they framed it. And then you imagine you're a Midwesterner in 1917. You've got German-speaking neighbors down the street. They read German newspapers. They sing German songs. Maybe they didn't buy a Liberty Bond. I don't know. And then you hear that Germany's trying to incite Mexico against the U.S. And then you're like, what the fuck? Fuck these Germans. That's the feeling that it incites. And that's how you get the idea of a fifth column in it. And it honestly, it doesn't matter if it's true. Because the function of the establishment of this fifth column idea is enough to severely impact the group who's unfortunate enough to be labeled as the fifth column. And I'll let you infer what I might mean for the contemporary argument in the United States, but
so
reads it the same way.
Theodore Roosevelt called it hyphenated Americanism.
Yeah.
So Americans who identified with both their ancestral heritage and their American nationality. So essentially dual loyalties. And you can understand it in the case of Germany or Germans, because German communities could be clannish. They could be, they could be very absorbed into their own communities.
For sure.
So,
that kind of takes me to the point. Like a lot of these German Americans did to prove their loyalty, and a lot of them changed their names to sound more Anglo. Like you mentioned one, Schmidt becoming Smith, Müller becoming Miller, Schneider becoming Snyder, and so on and so forth. And ethnic Germans were end up being the largest American ethnic group to serve in the war. Which is fascinating just by itself, right? This is a whole group of people that we're demonizing with propaganda, but they end up being the largest contingent that serves in the war.